This week on the Orange Box Podcast, we talk about how we did on our 2024 gaming resolutions, our 2025 gaming resolutions, Switch 2 leaks aplenty, further Half-Life 3 tinfoil Hattery, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 66. I am your host, the man who has twice the AI performance of the 4090, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who uses FrameGen in real life to make himself believe he is moving faster, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been largely, I guess you could say, uneventful. Not really too much has happened this past week. Of course, and I think you probably might have been caught up in this, the winter storm that passed through like the mid to eastern half of the country. So we got some snow here. Not a whole lot, probably about 5 to 6 inches, but yeah, had that come through. Earlier this week, though, I wanted to make the exact thing, but I didn't have, my sister has the pie pan, so I couldn't do it. But I was going to make the beef and broccoli pie, but like I said, I didn't have the I didn't have the pie pan, so I couldn't do that. So what I did was, instead, I sort of made a slight modification. I made the sauce and made the beef and broccoli, but instead what I did was I just put that in pasta instead, because I figured that should still taste good. And lo and behold, it tasted good.
We're gonna have to try that. That's a great idea.
Eventually, though, I do want to go back and actually make it into a pie. But for right now, I thought that'll be sufficient enough for me to at least try the sauce and try cooking the beef and blending in the broccoli and everything. But eventually, I do want to try making a crust, because I've never made a crust before. Granted, I've never made a pie before, but try doing that and then just making the whole thing all together and see how that turns out. But yeah, other than that, really not too much has happened.
Yeah, you actually, I mean, of course you don't have to do it in a pie pan. You could just do, like a regular 9x9 Pyrex dish or whatever. You could even do just the top crust, really, but I mean, obviously it's best if you do the whole crust and all that. So yeah, it's good stuff. Very cool. I'm glad that you at least got to try part of it. I mean, that was a recipe we got from a friend in Alaska many years ago. I don't even remember when that was. It was probably within our first year or two of marriage. So we've used that recipe for a really long time. But yeah, it's good stuff. As for my week, let's see here. Obviously, went back to work and just been getting settled back into everything. Right now, we're kind of in like a weird spot where they haven't fully determined our KPIs for the year, our key performance indicators. So there's some stuff that we've already started working on that we know is going to go towards that, but we don't have like set in stone the things that they expect us to do this year. So it's kind of a limbo spot. I mean, there's still stuff to do because there's other stuff that can be worked on, but it's just, I don't know. It's been a little bit of a weird week because I didn't go into the office at all last week. I just, figured ease myself back into working by working from home the first couple days, and then I am going into the office tomorrow, and depending on how this next winter storm turns out, maybe Friday, because it's supposed to be start snowing tomorrow evening. Like, they're saying it's going to start about an hour after I get off work, so theoretically it shouldn't be a problem for me to go to and from the office. But then depending on how much snow we get, which I'm not expecting a ton, but depending on how much snow we get, how the roads are after the fact, and the next morning will determine whether or not I go into the office. So, but yeah, LED music on Sunday and doing it again this week. Originally, it was going to be, I was going to swap with one of the other guys for this coming week because he's gone on the 26th. But since he was sick last week and he's still recovering from that, I just went ahead and offered to cover for him this week. And then I'll still cover the 26th. So it'll work out. I mean, I don't mind doing it. You know, I like doing the music, and it's something that keeps me playing my guitar, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be playing it a whole lot, because that's really the only reason I play is for church. And so, yeah. And I have enough experience leading to where it's like I'm fairly comfortable with it. I mean, I'm always nervous going up there because I'm an introvert, but I've done it, you know, many times, and, you know, led for 5 years at one of my churches. So it's really not that big of a deal. It's just more, it kind of takes away from some of my time to work on other stuff on the weekend, because I don't know, it's one more thing I have to work on. But as a result of that, I didn't end up doing anything with my comparison over the weekend. I just didn't work on it at all, and I'm not planning to have it done this weekend. I mean, I'm going to try to fit it in. Last weekend, I really ended up not having the time to work on it, but I'll at least try to get some work done on it over the weekend. I mean, on Saturday. But like, we're practicing on Saturday, and depending on what else we do, we'll see how much time I actually have. Either way, I'm just not expecting it to actually be ready to go up on Monday, most likely. So, and I'm not planning on it being ready to go. I just figure kind of the way that I'm looking at things right now is weeks when I am doing music, I'm going to plan on not having the pressure to get something done in time for Monday, because it's just one more thing to add to the pile. And of course, with everything starting back up, I just didn't really feel like I was ready to, I mean, like it was going to be a wise decision to try to push myself so much on that front. So either way, it's going to get done. And, well, you know, I should say, God willing, as long as I'm alive, it will get done one way or another. And probably after I do that comparison, I will most likely do Hellblade as the next comparison. So, both of those are going to be cool, but we'll talk more about Hellblade in a little while when we get to what we've been playing. I feel like there's something else I'm forgetting about, but it's nothing. It probably wasn't anything important. So, anything before we get into what you've been playing?
No, sir.
Okay, so give it to me. What have you been playing this week?
All right, so not a whole lot of stuff. So played some more Factorial with friends. Mostly it's just been trying to expand our base on the new planet that we're on. And I've handled some of the stuff with expanding, trying to improve some of our resources, but part of what I was doing was just trying to explore around some, because at one point we need, in order to generate a type of fuel, we need to harvest some of the eggs from the aliens that are on the planet. And so just trying to go around hunting them. And unfortunately, whenever you go into a spaceship from one planet to another, you have to leave everything in your inventory behind, except for whatever armor you're wearing and whatever weapons you're carrying, which is partially fine, since I had part of my power armor has defense mechanisms on it, but unfortunately I couldn't bring any of the ammo I had on me, so even though I had my guns, I couldn't, actually use them because there was no ammo. And the resources on the planet we're on, they're not really, well, we don't have anything set up to actually create ammo right now. So, I mean, fortunately, it's not like the creatures here are all that powerful, but at the same time, it would be nice if I was able to use my gun and make things a little better. But yeah, so not really too much to say about that. Most of my gameplay has been spent in Stardew Valley. I've been focusing mainly on trying to improve stuff that I can do on the island. since I really haven't done that much in my single player file, and that's coming along slowly. I'm looking up guides and stuff, just or at least looking up the wiki just so I can see what I need to actually look for, what I'm trying to find, because eventually I do want to sort of make things easier, because it takes up too much time having to go back and forth from Stardew Valley to the island. So eventually I want to try to create the warp totem, which teleports me to the farm, and get another one that teleports me to the island. So that way I'm not spending roughly, say, 5 in-game hours to get back and forth, when I could just go straight, stay on my farm, teleport, and while I'm on the island, teleport back. So that's what I'm going to try to eventually work toward. But yeah, so I mean, I've been pretty much just going around trying to find the golden walnuts, which are sort of like the smaller currency that help you build improvements, like building new bridges to access new areas, to create shortcuts, and also eventually build a farm on the island, so that way you don't have to worry about running back to the main place to rest up for the next day. You can just like sleep there and not have to worry about passing out or anything like that. So still working on that stuff. But yeah, making progress generally slowly, but it's still coming along well enough. But yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Good stuff. Yeah, that reminds me. So I did look up on Nintendo Switch Online, and they do have both Harvest Moon 64, which, well, I already knew they had that, and the original Harvest Moon. And like, I was tempted to play, but I decided not to, mostly because I just didn't really want to start something up right now. But also because, like, man, if I was going to play the original Harvest Moon, I would really love to play with the Super Nintendo controller, because I've never actually played the game like the Super Nintendo version. I mean, I should say, I've never played on a Super Nintendo. Then I was thinking, maybe if I really want to do that, maybe I'll just load up, figure out how to load the Super Nintendo version onto my SNES Classic and connect that or something. Because, like, I think that would be fun experiencing it that way, since I played that game exclusively through emulation. I mean, like, it was originally, I emulated it on PC back in like 2000, and which is what, you know, made me fall in love with those games. And then I played it on like the Wii U I played it on the Wii and the Wii U as well. And I don't think it's on 3DS for any of the Super Nintendo games. I'd have to look that up. I might have to see if they have that, because if they have it on 3DS, I probably would play it there, because that's a great place to play Super Nintendo games. So anyway, but the games that I did play, so let me start off by saying I initially was, originally my plan was to try and complete either Psychonauts or Superland. But both games, I basically just kind of got stuck, and it wasn't like, oh, it's difficult. It's more like I was having a hard time figuring out how to proceed, and I didn't feel like looking up how to proceed, because I'm just stubborn. So I was just kind of floating between other games, trying to figure out what I really wanted to play, because I don't want to get too in depth on anything right now, because of the fact that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth comes out, in a couple weeks, or let's see, it's what, just over 2 weeks, or no, it's about just under 3 weeks, something like that. Anyway, it's like 2.5 weeks. And so it's like I just don't want to get involved in anything that's really deep. So I've one of the things I decided to do was I decided to start installing some GOG games, some of the DRM free titles on the Steam Deck, because the only other time that I had tried doing that was before I realized that I could actually get the offline installer, and had done that with like a couple games, like I can't remember one of them. Oh, Beyond the Steel Sky, or Beneath the Steel Sky, and the other one was Mortal Shell. And I had done both of those through GOG Galaxy, which is like, it worked, but I didn't really want to have another launcher, so I decided to do some of the offline ones. One of the first things I tried, and I don't have any footage recorded because I couldn't get it working, is Dragon Age Origins, because I went ahead and grabbed that on GOG because it was finally on sale. It was $5, and of course DRM free should solve the problems. And of course, I also had mentioned to my buddy who the Steam version had given him a ton of problems and just has major issues on PC, which is one of the reasons why he is so much not wanting to game on PC. But anyway, so I told him about it, and I wanted to test it out as well. And I tested it out on my desktop, and it actually just ran flawlessly, had no problems. You boot it up initially, it does a quick scan of your hardware, you press play, and then you're good to go. No problems. Added it to Steam, it's great. Don't have to use the EA version anymore. But the Steam Deck, unfortunately, the best I can do with it, I can get to the launcher for it. Because it has its own, DRM-free launcher, but can't get past that. I tried just doing the shortcut for the game itself, or, the exe for the game itself. It will not launch. And I tried a bunch of different versions of Proton, and I looked at different things online to see what there was. It seems like it might be because the issues that the game has by default, based on being designed for older hardware, there are patches you can apply with the EA and Steam versions that fix, or rather, at least with the EA version, I'm not sure about the Steam version, but you can fix those on the Windows side of things. But on Steam Deck, even through desktop mode, even though GOG has actual patches, separate patches that you can download and install, the problem is that because of the way that it does it through Proton, it doesn't recognize that it has the game already installed, and that you can't direct where the patch goes. So when you try to boot it up, it just says it can't find the game, and it won't let you choose where the game is, so you can't install the patches that you need in order to run the game. So that's really annoying, and it's kind of funny though at the same time, because the Steam version has all sorts of problems when you're trying to run it on Windows, but on Steam Deck it runs fine. And then even though it's still using it's using Origin, or it's using EA launcher ultimately, because it still has that DRM, but it runs fine on the Steam Deck. You can get it running. It's keyboard and mouse controls, and you have to do some translation, configuring controls in order to get it working properly, but it works. But when you try to do the the actual EA launcher version or the GOG version, you cannot get the game to launch. And it's dumb. I didn't particularly want to play it. It's more I just wanted to see if I could get it working, because I would like to play the game in the future. It's just that it looks like the only way I could get it working on the Steam Deck would be to get the Steam version. So I would have the game 3 times. I think the first time I got it, it was free through EA. It was only $5 when I bought it through GOG. So it's if I had to buy the Steam version in order for it to work, it's not a huge deal. Because, I wouldn't return the GOG version, because having the DRM free is I want that. But it's still annoying. So I did get some of my a few GOG games working, however. So one of those was Mortal Shell, which, I had previously installed on the Steam Deck, but I just removed it because I wasn't really ready to dive into it, especially because I was still in the middle of Dark Souls and everything. But got the DRM free version installed. The only thing that's annoying is that, much like with the patch for Dragon Age, it doesn't recognize the location to install the DLC. So, even though I'm not anywhere near a point where it's a problem necessarily, it's still annoying that if, I got into this game and I wanted to play the DLC, the only way I would be able to do it is on Windows. So there may be a way to work around that, but from what I could find in GOG forums for this type of problem in general, it just doesn't seem like anyone has anything to say about doing it on the Steam Deck. So I don't know. I'll dig into that one more if I ever get into this game. But in terms of how it looks and runs, it runs fine. It is an Unreal Engine 4 game, so I mean it's like way better looking than Dark Souls. Maybe not Dark Souls 3, but it's probably pretty much on par with Dark Souls 3. Maybe it probably can't. I mean, it looks better if you turn up the settings. If the settings are turned more down, like what I had, then it ends up being different. But with what I played, it basically was, it's just different than Dark Souls. I had to definitely mess around with the controls, or setting up the button configuration to make it feel a little more like Dark Souls in terms of how it controls, so it wasn't throwing me off. But it's hard to explain exactly how the game works. Have you tried Mortal Shell at all before?
Not yet. It's like I know the general idea of the gameplay as far as like you take control of these types of shells, and if you can get knocked out of them and stuff. Yeah. But like I haven't really played the game though.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it, and the other thing is like you can harden, which is like essentially like blocking, but you can do it at different times in order to give yourself advantages at different points. And I honestly I think if I was ever going to really try to get into this game, I would need to look up specifically how it's supposed to work, because like I really don't understand the mechanics well enough. And I mean, the game gives you some basic stuff in the initial tutorial, but it's still just kind of like, okay, I don't really understand this well enough. I do think that it's something that I could definitely find myself eventually getting into, but really I mostly just installed it because I wanted to mess around with these offline installers. So, but another game that I installed that way was Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. So this is actually one of the first PC games I bought back when I got my laptop in 2010. And I had played up to a certain point and then just gotten stuck and never moved past that. And this time I was just starting from scratch. But the game does not have native button controls for it, and so you have to just configure it, using the Steam controller configuration. And so, I mean, that worked well enough. It was, some of it's a little janky, like the camera controls are a little odd because of how abrupt movements are, but it works fine. And the game feels a little slow to me, at least in terms of movement, mostly just because I'm so used to more modern games that don't feel quite so slow. But it runs really well, 90 frames per second. There wasn't really anything I could do, I think, in terms of the visual settings, apart from just I might have been able to turn off motion blur, but I don't even think I could do that. I don't remember exactly. It was pretty limited. I didn't play very far into it. I basically played just a little past when you first get the dagger, and that's about it. Because I wasn't really like looking to actually get into it right now, but it's more like I wanted to have it on the Steam Deck, because whenever I'm ready to actually really play the game, the Steam Deck is the perfect place to do it. The only thing I don't like, at least, and I haven't looked up any way to do it, but it doesn't do widescreen at all. So, sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I agree. That was gonna be a question I was gonna ask you later, if the GOG version had widescreen support added as a patch or not, because it's not available by default on Steam. Like, you actually have to go and download a patch to get widescreen support. Yeah. So you might probably have to do that for
Yeah,
that
I'll
version
have to look and see how to get widescreen with the GOG version on Steam Deck, because if I can figure that out, I would very much like that. Because, like, I mean, I'm fine playing in 4:3, but I would much rather have widescreen because I don't like the 4:3 on, you know, a nice widescreen display. So, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, definitely not a difficult game from, you know, what little I played. I know that it was quite a bit later that I was in the game where I got stuck on just one of the fights, and some of the controls is just I don't have any sort of muscle memory yet, so I haven't quite like gotten comfortable with it, and I keep pressing the wrong buttons to jump and so on and so forth, or more like wall running and all that. I mean, like I was starting to get it, but didn't get a whole lot done with that. And then, you know, I had talked about this the last time that we talked about that Oblivion remake. I decided to install Oblivion on the Steam Deck and play that a little bit. So with Oblivion, I didn't play super far. I basically just got past like the very beginning of the game and went into a cavern right after you get outside of the dungeon, and just went through the majority of that. Of course, this one also does not have native button controls on PC, and so it's just, you know, configuring the controls with the Steam Deck wasn't too difficult to do. I was able to get it, you know, working well enough to where I felt pretty comfortable with the controls. I think I'd probably mess around with it a little bit more just to maybe set some more shortcuts and that sort of thing. But otherwise, like, it's, you know, it's Oblivion. It's solid. One thing that I definitely always have liked better about Oblivion over Skyrim is the fact that you have a separate button specifically for casting magic, which that's one thing that always bugged me about Skyrim, is the fact that you had to use one of your weapon slots to cast magic. But yeah, so I didn't play super long. I'm like, if I was going to really get into this, I think I would probably be aiming more for basically like a pyromancer build or like sorcery, you know, pyro type build, because like I've done the stealth archer thing a bunch in Skyrim, and I don't particularly like the archery in this game, at least, and all that, even though you can use, you know, gyro for aiming and everything, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, Oblivion is a solid game, and I enjoy it. I'm not diving into Oblivion right now. Like, I think at some point I could definitely see myself doing that, but I don't know. It's difficult to convince myself to actually do something like that. It's possible if I could find like my old save, I might consider it, but I'm not sure if I have that on this computer. I know I have it on my laptop, and I still have my laptop. I would just have to power it on and wait forever for it to boot up and then track down the save. But yeah. Either way, I mean, it's Oblivion. Oblivion's great in many ways. Character models aside. Character models are garbage. But I decided to try out something new, and this was really just on a whim. There was a game that showed up on Steam sales that's basically like a Diablo-like, called Grim Dawn, and it was on sale for $2.50, so I grabbed it. I only played a little bit, like maybe an hour, and I dig it. I mean, it's, you know, as fun as a Diablo game, basically. It feels a bit more like closer to Diablo 2 than anything else. Like probably more on the difficulty level of like Diablo 4, I would say, but it's more like Diablo 2 mostly because of how the inventory is managed, which, you know, is how Diablo 1 and 2 are, where you have a lot more limited space to deal with. So yeah, but yeah, I like what I played. I just didn't play very much. I basically just kind of messed around with it a little bit, and I can't remember if it runs at 90 frames per second or if it's only 60. But either way, you know, it ran really well, and I think it said that it would get like 4 to 4.5 hours, something like that, for battery life. So that's good. The main thing that keeps me from actually getting into this one, apart from, you know, not really wanting to dive in this kind of thing right now, is the fact that I still haven't done a lot of the story for Diablo 4. And I think that if I was ever going to actually play something like this, I need to get through the main story of Diablo 4. Because, like, I don't even know that I would ever do the DLC for Diablo. But I would at least like to finish the main campaign, which is something I've mostly just been doing whenever my wife and I play together. So, but yeah, it's pretty cool. I liked it. Something that was definitely more on a whim, and this was basically just like playing because I was trying to find something to keep my interest while I, you know, waiting for Rebirth to come out, is I decided to finally boot up Pikmin on the Switch. So I've never played the original Pikmin or Pikmin 2. The only Pikmin experience I have before this was the little bit of Pikmin 3 I played on the Wii U. But that one I never got like super into, mostly because of the fact that I felt kind of weird starting with 3, and then I just never grabbed 1 and 2, and then by the time I halfway considered it, you know, the Switch was out, and then, you know, eventually it just got to a point where I was waiting around, and then, of course, Pikmin 1 and 2 came to the Switch, and so eventually I got that, and yeah, so anyway, Pikmin 1 definitely feels like a GameCube game. I'm not a huge fan of the controls. I definitely can see why they updated them when they ported it to the Wii. But it's I mean, I still definitely would, if I was going to, well, I should say, I would like to play this one, and I'd like to play all of them, because I know that, like, the core of the game is good. It's just mostly, like, I'm not really a fan of particularly how you aim the cursor and stuff to do stuff with the Pikmin and everything, and it's just, I don't know. I know that a lot of the initial jank in the first game is improved in the second game, and of course Pikmin 3, what I played of that, it was really basically gone. I mean, like, it wasn't janky at all. Though I really wonder how it will control on the Switch, since you don't have the stylus as an option. But anyway, so yeah, a little bit that I played, I liked. I'm only on day 7 or 8. I think I might have finished day 7. And you have, like, it's like 30 days is what you have for the full thing. So not real far into it, but I mean, it's pretty cool. Like, I could see myself enjoying it more, especially as I get more kinds of Pikmin, but right now all I have is red and yellow, so there's that. But what I have, well, actually, I'll back up. I'll get to the game that I've been playing the most here in a little bit, but I do want to briefly mention that today I decided to, just because I wanted to check it out, boot up Hellblade on the Switch. And like, I'm not like playing the game, I more just wanted to check it out. I basically just got to the very first combat encounter, and I'm pretty impressed with it. Now, of course, obviously it doesn't run the greatest. Like, you know, Switch version is going to be 30 frames per second. It might drop below that. I'm not positive. Like, I'm not Digital Foundry or anything, so I couldn't tell you for sure. I will say, in terms of how it looks, I mean, it definitely looks better docked than in handheld mode, and the footage here is docked footage. But the cutscenes, all of the cutscenes don't seem to be down resolutioned at all. Like, they all seem like they're basically the same resolution as what you get on PC and on Steam Deck. So they obviously just kept those intact. But then when you're playing the main game, like it still looks really good, but it's definitely blurry. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it looks good. Like for a Switch game specifically. It's not as downgraded as I would expect it to be, given the fact that it's on Switch. But of course, compared to Steam Deck, I'm sure that there's a definite difference. And I know, like, the settings that I did on Steam Deck, I did a mix of different settings in order to get a solid 60 frames per second. And this is obviously nowhere near 60. But yeah. I mean, this is a game I do think I could see myself playing again on Switch, more so that I can kind of show off a little more of the game than I would be able to otherwise, because like the Steam version, because I've already completed it, I can load into a chapter and show off the specific section, because the big thing for me, like, I really want to show off is Helheim, because I know that originally when I played it on the Steam Deck, that's where the performance tanked. But as far as the as far as that goes, like, I don't know if the performance tanking was just that, like, I had the Steam Deck on too long, because I've had occasions where the Steam Deck performance will tank in something, and then I'll reset the Steam Deck, and then it's fine and it's normal. But I don't think I've ever tried going back to Helheim in that game to see if it was any better. So anyway, I don't know. Either way, this is not a game that demands a higher frame rate. It's better with a higher frame rate always. But because of the fact that it's more a walking simulator with some puzzles and light combat, it's not one that would be like the worst thing in the world playing at 30. And I think that's, where most people played it anyways, at 30. So. But the big game that I have spent a bunch of time in and have pretty much settled on as my main game until Rebirth comes out is Death Stranding. So I just decided that I was going to hop into that and just work on knocking out the remaining achievements. I think I've gotten like 2, maybe 3 of the ones that I didn't have yet so far. A lot of it is more grindy stuff, just like completing premium deliveries in order to rank up, with different. I can't think of the right word. Like the different people that you have that you deliver stuff to. So you're supposed to get the rank maxed out with everyone. You're supposed to get like a certain number of premium deliveries, or get like a certain number of legendary ratings on your premium deliveries, which you can only do on hard difficulty or higher, which, thankfully you can just swap on the fly. So it was easy enough to do that. And they haven't been, really any harder than the main game, than the game was otherwise. So, yeah, but I've been playing that quite a bit. I've mostly been streaming it from my PC, either to my Steam Deck or my phone, depending on whether or not my wife wants to use the Steam Deck at the time. But yeah, I mean, I love this game, and it's been fun coming back to the world, and I feel like this is a good thing for me to occupy my time while I'm waiting, because I don't know for sure if I will manage to get the remaining achievements before Rebirth drops. But even if I don't, it's not really a big deal. I'm not like, oh, I need to do it. It's more like, I want to do it right now, so I'll just work on that until Rebirth drops. And if I finish before then, great. If I don't, then I don't, and I'll come back to it later. Really, more than anything, I just would like to finish all the achievements before Death Stranding 2 comes out this year, assuming that it ends up dropping day one on PC, which I think it probably will. just based on the way the wind has been blowing and the fact that it's not a PlayStation owned title. It's not a first party PlayStation title, but a Kojima Productions owned title and franchise. And since he, just put the game on Xbox, I could see very easily that he will decide to make it day one on both PlayStation and PC at minimum, and potentially also Xbox day one. So, but yeah, I dig this game. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And I'm glad to be back in this world. I did end up reinstalling it on the Steam Deck as well, even though the performance is more difficult to deal with than it used to be. Especially like some sections, like if you have a section with a lot of snow falling or rain falling, sometimes the performance drops quite a bit. And most of the time it's fine if it does, but like in general, I just haven't really been bothering with it. Like I mostly installed it on the Steam Deck because I know that if I want to play it at work, that's really the only way I can, because I'm not going to be able to stream it there. So, obviously on my breaks, but, when I'm on my break and I want to play, then I'll just play on the Steam Deck and call it good. And the streaming performance has been great. It's been very satisfying. So I will probably be streaming it most of the time otherwise, unless I'm just playing it on the computer itself. Just sitting at my computer. So, but yeah, that is everything.
All right. So I've got several different things to discuss with you. So first off, going back to the GOG games. Also, quick question. Also, I don't think you mentioned, was Oblivion through GOG, or was that
that's Steam version?
Okay. So for all the GOG games, I don't know if you've considered this before or not, or if you just wanted to only do the offline installers. There is a program called Heroic, Heroic Launcher, that sort of acts as a launcher in place of GOG Galaxy and Epic Game Store. So that way it's like, so you can run the games through Linux, download them through there. There probably might be a Windows version as well, but I know that primarily the goal was to play games on Linux when you couldn't download them through the source, because they aren't supported that way. So I don't know if downloading any of those games through there could potentially help. I don't think it probably won't do anything with regards to Prince of Persia and the widescreen, since that wasn't already in the game. But I don't know if that could help with Dragon Age Origins or not.
Yeah, I feel like I might have at least tried doing it through Galaxy and then it didn't work. But I might be thinking of a different game too. It might have been something else that I was thinking of. So I might try that, or at least, I think probably, if anything, I would try the Heroic Launcher, because I'm not sure if Galaxy would necessarily help on that front. But I don't know. I'll try a couple different options. I might try Galaxy first, because that's going to be the simpler option initially, and then if that doesn't work, then try Heroic. But the main thing is just that it takes a while to download either way, even though it's not like a huge game, but it's just big enough to where it takes just long enough. Actually, now that I think about it, I haven't actually tried downloading it, because I've had the offline installer, so it's the installing that takes a while. It's not the downloading. But anyway.
Okay. Yeah, and it's also weird too about Dragon Age, the fact that, because I don't know if it's, it probably might just be it might just be GOG who's updating their version of the game, because it's just weird that that game is up to date and you can play it on modern hardware. Granted, if you're in Windows, whereas if you're playing the Steam version, EA hasn't touched that game at all, and you have to go. There's a dedicated, there's a dedicated forum thread, or at least there's a pinned message in the forum. So here's how you get the game to work. Follow this step by step so you can get the game to run. And it's just
there's like a special patch that you have to install that's like a fan made patch that works, but the problem is that it doesn't work with if you try doing it through Linux, or at least not on the Steam Deck, because it doesn't recognize the exe file that it needs to find in order to patch it. Now, GOG has the patch that takes care of both of the issues that it has, which one of it is that it tries using only 2 CPU cores and it needs to use 4 in order to launch initially, but then also that it maybe that's the only one thing. I feel like there was a second aspect to it, but either way, the point is that I can't get it to do what it needs to do, and so I haven't been able to launch it. But I may just have to try doing it through Galaxy and see if that fixes the problem, or Galaxy or Heroic.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely hope that helps. However you can get it to work, I definitely hope you're able to get that to run. And regarding Prince of Persia, so have you played any of the other Prince of Persia games? Or
no?
Oh, well, actually, no. You said you played Lost Crown.
Well, yeah, a tiny bit, but I mean that was really just kind of testing it out. So, I
guess outside of the issue you're having, like, what do you think? Then you also mentioned the jank. What do you think of the game overall? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I mean, like, I know that I will like the game because the bit that I played back in 2010, I enjoyed. It was just I got stuck on one of the fights and I never went back to it after that. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool game, and I absolutely believe that it's going to be something that I will enjoy. It was just like I said, I got stuck on a fight. I know nowadays, because I am a lot more skilled than I was back then, and because I don't have now that I've been through Dark Souls enough times, these other challenges don't seem nearly as drastic. But yeah.
Should you eventually get to them, at least on the Steam version, this might also apply to the GOG version as well. You'd also have to, if you want to have patches for widescreen for those for the other 2 games, Two Kingdoms and Warrior Within, because those also are just 4x3 as well. So that's just something to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, and here's the question I want to ask you. So you never played on an actual Super Nintendo before?
Well, it's not that I never played Harvest Moon on a Super Nintendo.
Okay.
And I mean, like, I didn't own a Super Nintendo when I was a kid. I didn't even, the first time I actually owned a Super Nintendo was as an adult, and even then it was it didn't have like a first party controller. It just had like a third party controller that felt really cheap. And it was funny because I was at the time I was just like collecting old consoles, and I put up a thing on Facebook or whatever, and there was one at our local pregnancy center, and they were giving it, and they were selling it. It sold to me for $5, and it had like 12 games with it. I mean, it had Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country, and I think Link to the Past, and Sim City, and I can't remember what all games came with it, but it was quite a few games that it came with. But the main thing is, for me, it didn't have Super Metroid. It doesn't have the same nostalgia for me. Like, I have nostalgia for certain games from the Super Nintendo, which I played either through emulation or otherwise. I guess really technically all just through emulation, but it just because of the fact that it didn't have quite the same nostalgia attached to it for me, and I needed to get rid of a bunch of stuff before we moved from Alaska, I ended up just selling it. I mean, I got like $200 for it or something, so it was pretty good, But I mean, really, the only Nintendo console, only older one that really had nostalgia attached to it for me was N64, because that was really where I got into Nintendo. Even though I'd played Super Nintendo before that, Nintendo 64 was what got me into Nintendo franchises.
Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing though is really the Sega fanboy, huh?
Well, it wasn't so much fanboy. It was more like I didn't have any consoles when I was growing up, and at least not initially. And when I had gone over to a friend's house, we played Sega a bunch. And so it was like when I finally convinced my dad when I was 12 to let me buy a console with birthday money, it's like Sega I was more familiar with, like Streets of Rage and Sonic and various platformers, and I could like do Mortal Kombat on there, which I really liked Mortal Kombat, and so it was just like that was what I wanted to play. And then it wasn't until later that I actually had the opportunity to play some Super Nintendo games, and as much as I enjoyed those, I couldn't see a good reason to keep it, particularly because of the fact that, for one, it didn't have, a real Nintendo controller attached to it, and that the one controller had, it felt so cheap. It's like just a knockoff, like not even a good third-party controller. It was just bad. But also because I had a Super Nintendo Classic, and so it's like, well, I could get the same feel. I have the official Nintendo, Super Nintendo controllers, and I could, play the games on this mini hardware. Because that's the big thing for me, is like more than anything, it was wanting to have the experience of playing the game with the type of controller that came with the game originally, because it's not quite the same playing it with a different controller. It's just different. It's like, yeah, it's still going to be a great game. Like, I mean, I played, most Super Nintendo games I played on a keyboard because I emulated them, and on SNES 9X, I was playing Chrono Trigger that way, and Super Metroid, my first Metroid game, and various other things, Final Fantasy 2/4 and 3/6, and Breath of Fire and Harvest Moon, and I mean, it's like there's a bunch of games I liked, but for one, I didn't have any of the games I really liked with that system. They were too expensive. I think the only thing I had that I actually really liked of those games that I was legitimately like, oh, I would like to play that, is A Link to the Past. And everything else was just kind of like, yeah. I mean, like Super Mario World's great, but I'm not as much into the timed Mario games. I've always disliked the timer. Like, the only ones where there's an exception to that for me are 3D Land and 3D World. And the rest of them, it's kind of like, I don't like having the timer when I'm doing these levels, because it makes it not as much fun for me, because then I can't take the time to explore and, all that. So, anyway.
One last thing, something I was just curious about with regarding Pikmin 3, and you mentioned the curse, or the fact that Pikmin, at least on the Wii, it had the Wii remote, and that
right.
had pointer. Couldn't you technically do that with the Joy-Cons? I mean, I know it's not gonna be the exact same thing, but don't some games sort of act as that?
I hadn't thought to try it, but that probably would work. Because I've only done it in handheld mode. I haven't tried it in any other. Well, I should say I've done it in handheld mode, and I did it docked, but I was using the Pro controller. So I might have to try that, because that would probably make the experience better. I mean, granted, the gyro controls don't work nearly as well as Motion Plus did, because you don't have the infrared with that as well. But still, that would probably work pretty well. I mean, I'll have to try that out and see if it works. Because that would definitely make it easier. Because honestly, I hate the fact that your cursor is the same on the same joystick as your movement. That makes it more difficult to properly select where you want the Pikmin to go and everything. But of course, obviously, because on the original GameCube you had the C stick, which wasn't like a real joystick, so
Yeah. And I mean, you can definitely check and see, because the only reason I thought about it was because I remembered that it's sort of an option for Metroid Prime Remastered if you sort of want to have that motion control from
I tried that for a while with the motion controls on Metroid Prime Remastered, because I love the Wii controls on Metroid Prime. It was so good. But unfortunately, the gyro, mostly the biggest issue was when you're turning around, that it would lose sync so easily, and it was a big problem, and so I eventually just gave up and ended up switching over to stick controls. I mean, the GameCube style controls were great too, but I mean, it's nice being able to aim independently, and of course, having the dual stick controls actually make that game quite a bit easier than it was without them, even though the motion controller is still my favorite for that game.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's all the comments and questions that I had. Yeah, definitely good stuff all around.
For sure. All right. Anything else before we get into news and our resolutions?
No, sir.
All right. I think because of the fact that we ran out of time to do them last week, I want to start off by taking care of the resolutions talk. So last year we had our gaming resolutions for 2024, and I want us to first just list out what we had for our gaming resolutions, and then we can talk about how we did with those. After we go through that, we can talk about what our gaming resolutions are for 2025. So start us off by talking about what your gaming resolutions were for 2024.
Yeah, so last year, my gaming resolutions, I had to actually go back to figure this out. I didn't realize I had this many. So my gaming resolutions for 2024 were to complete Sekiro and get all the achievements in the game, to go back to older games that I had played and get the final achievements for them, to complete Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime Remastered and 100% the game, and then to also go back to a couple games in my backlog and just finish them completely. So, sad to say, I did not complete a single one of these resolutions. And I'm going to partially blame the fact that there were so many games that came out that grabbed my attention, that seemed to come sort of almost back to back, because Power World was a sudden drop that I was not expecting to get attached to at the beginning of the year, and then probably around, I played that for a few months, and I was of course playing Helldivers, but then Ghost of Tsushima came out, and that grabbed my attention. I was playing that for a good while, and I was just latched onto that. But then eventually I started playing Kingdom Hearts, and that was just when it all went downhill from there. So I mean, while I did go back and play a few games, overall though, those were like the main games that I played in 2024. So I never really went, and I mean, yeah, I don't think I went back to Sekiro. I went back, I want to say I went back and played a little bit of Metroid Prime Remastered, because I do remember I went as far as going to the Phazon Mines. But I don't think I even completed that area yet. No, I know I didn't complete it because I didn't face the Omega Pirate. So I didn't even finish the base game, let alone get all the items and whatnot. And yeah, I definitely know that some of the achievements, and another thing that also with the achievements is the fact that there were a couple games that I completed all the achievements for them, but then there were updates and new content that came out where they added more achievements, And that was a problem because I was already in the mindset of thinking, all right, I finally got these games 100%ed, and then new patch comes out, more achievements. I'm just like, And I mean, one of the games that I even 100%ed, it's a hard mode that came out, and essentially you have to face off against the main villain in one of the encounters that happens in the game, and you can't die at all, or the game automatically, like, your data gets erased completely. So you have to beat him in an encounter once to get the achievement, but you actually have to be strong enough to face him in the encounter, which just means you're gonna have to go through a bunch of stuff to get to that point. So that's why I never really wanted to go back to that game. So that's part. I'm gonna say that's another reason why I did not do the achievement ones, because there were more achievements that just kept popping up that really frustrated me. But yeah, that's how I did for my resolutions.
All right. Well, I set more manageable resolutions because I knew that trying to set, especially finishing specific games, was a bad idea, because just too often I have frequently in the past set myself resolutions that were just not entirely realistic, or, well, I should say just not entirely realistic. So my resolutions for 2024 was, number 1, play more games from my backlog of the new purchases. Number 2, play games from franchises that I've wanted to play in the past but never got to, like Devil May Cry, classic PC titles, various games on 3DS and Vita, many of which were also in my backlog. Try some new types of games that venture outside of my usual genres, like turn-based strategy and Souls-like, some of which are also in my backlog. And number 4, try to take more of the time I play to just enjoy games I play and not rush through to finish them. So I did pretty well for playing more games for my backlog than new purchases. It took me a while to go through all the games I played in 2024 to figure out what was new, what was backlog, and not, of course, since I said play and I didn't say finish, because that wasn't really the goal, was just to play more stuff in my backlog than new purchases. What it came down to, and this is roughly accurate, possible that I missed some games, 77 old/backlog games, 14 of which I beat, and that counts games where I beat them more than once, like Dark Souls. 52 new games that I played, 11 of which I beat. And once again, if I played something more than once, then that counts, although I don't think any of the new games were like that. But so then ultimately I did end up playing more games from my backlog than new purchases, though it wasn't significantly more. It was, a total of 15 more backlog games, and some of those I only played a tiny bit. So I'm just counting them because I just said play, I didn't say finish. But I did still beat more old games than new games. So technically, even if one of those was Dark Souls 3 times. Play games from franchises that I've wanted to play in the past but never got to, like Devil May Cry and so on. I did play Devil May Cry 1 and 2. I played Jedi Fallen Order. I played Ni no Kuni, Psychonauts, and Okamiden. So Devil May Cry was just a franchise I'd always wanted to get into, but I had never played before. So, played the first 2 games in that and started the third. Jedi Fallen Order I had wanted to play and had bought a couple years prior as well. And finally got into and played through, enjoyed, loved. Finally played Ni no Kuni, which I had been interested in for a long time, but, didn't make a whole lot of progress in it. Played like maybe 9 hours or something. Played some Psychonauts and played a little bit of Okamiden as well. And then trying new types of games. I didn't do turn-based strategy really, but I did do Souls-like. So, and then of course, obviously, I ended up thoroughly enjoying Dark Souls Remastered and played it 3.5 times, and got all the achievements. Played Dark Souls 3, which I enjoyed, though I definitely need to go back to it and do the DLC. Played a tiny bit of Demon Souls and played Jedi Fallen Order, which is light on the Souls-like elements, but it is Souls-like in some ways. And then my final one was trying to spending more of my time enjoying the games and not just rush through to finish them. It was mixed on that. There was definitely situations where I did do that more, but then there's also other times where I was just kind of pushing through. So, yeah, it was a little bit of both. But 2025 gaming resolutions. Start us off.
All right, so this time I decided after that embarrassing performance to rein things in a bit more with my expectations. This one is kind of one that I had from years back before before we got this port, but because I've technically already started it and I've gotten through about halfway, I would say, if not maybe a little bit, well, I'd say still halfway or so. I think it's feasible enough for me to do this, and I think I should, unless I get really burnt out, I think this one should be feasible, and that is to finish the Kingdom Hearts saga. So that means just finish Birth by Sleep, do 2.8, and which would be Dream Drop Distance 0.8, and I mean technically watch the movie, and then Kingdom Hearts 3 and the DLC. So I think that's feasible enough, and especially considering the fact that my main goal originally with wanting to play through all the games was just to be sort of caught up for Kingdom Hearts 3, which I always wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is doable.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why this won't happen unless, like I said, I get burnt out sometime. So that's one of them. The other one I have is to just finish at least one game in my backlog. Like, it doesn't have, or actually not a backlog, but finish a game I've started but haven't finished yet. So I've definitely got quite a few of those lying around. So just finish one of them. Off the top of my head, the one that I sort of want, well, two I want to finish right now, that I have, in mind to finish. One is Dark Souls Remastered, finish that. And the other one is Spider-Man Remastered. So those are the two games off the top of my head that I want to finish. But any game that I haven't finished yet, I just want to finish that and knock that out. And as a side mission, maybe, because they'll also depend on a lot of things. One of the things which we might be talking, we'll be discussing this later on. But maybe at least just finish Metroid Prime Remastered before Metroid Prime 4 comes out this year. But that's a big maybe optional side mission.
Yeah.
But and I don't even know how that's gonna go. But other than that, though, that's everything. I would I want to keep it somewhat simple and manageable because last year was not good.
Yeah, that's fair. Set something that's reasonable, and hopefully you'll exceed it. And one thing I like is, that I've discovered is a good idea is to set something that's enough of a challenge, but not so much to where it's like, okay, this is not likely to even happen. The goals I set for myself last year, I kept some of it vague enough to where it's like there was some wiggle room, but I still, at least was basically able to do what I wanted to do. Playing more games that were older from my backlog, that was definitely something where I knew that was going to be a challenge, because it's there's always new game. Always buying new games and stuff like that, especially when they're cheap. When you buy 20 games or whatever from Instant Gaming like I did last year. But my 2025 resolutions, this first one's kind of we'll see if it actually happens. So that is to try and get the remaining achievements in Death Stranding before Rebirth launches. But I'm kind of spreading it out and saying more so, I mean, like I was going to I guess, let me back up. So what I actually have written here is get remaining achievements in Death Stranding and or finish at least one more game before Rebirth launches, which would be, one of the ones that's already in progress, like Superland, Psychonauts, or Okamiden. Technically, it's reasonably doable. Honestly, I don't expect to be able to do both things. I think it's more likely that I'd be able to do one of those things, but it's just kind of like, well, if, let's say, Death Stranding, I played enough over the weekend to where I managed to actually get most of the remaining achievements and was done this weekend, because it's theoretically possible, then yeah, I would probably have enough time to finish the game, but I'm not expecting to. So, my number 2 resolution is finish more of the games that I started in previous years. So there's quite a number of those, and we'll see what happens on that front. Some of them I may end up having to just restart, but I'm hoping to just basically grab some of the games that I was like close to crossing the finish line and finish them out. And of course, since I say from previous years, that could also include 2024. My number 3 is to finally finish Assassin's Creed Odyssey to my satisfaction, which is specifically to finish all of the remaining story for the DLC. That's a goal that I have to accomplish this year, and preferably before Christmas time, so that way I'm not, when I get to watching Die Hard, I can be playing a different Assassin's Creed game than the one I've been playing for the past 5 years. And then my number 4 is to play at least one game in the Darksiders series. Since I have all of them, there's no reason why I can't give at least the first one another go. I know that they're different genres from game to game, but I still think that it is quite doable and would give me an opportunity to try something new. And then finally, play at least one random game from my GOG library / free games, the games that I didn't pay anything for. So I'm thinking that at some point I want to just like do like one of those wheel spinning things where you put in a bunch of things and then just have it pick a game for me out of my GOG library. And I have like 101 games in GOG, most of which I've never touched. So, I mean, there's a few that are games that are just GOG copies of games I already have on Steam and or have already played and maybe even beaten or, what have you. But yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good though. Nice. So, so actually, how many achievements did you say you had left for Death Stranding?
I think right now I am down to, let me double check. I think it's like 10, give or take. Let's see. Right now I am at, it's 9. And it's technically 8 because the last one is specifically the one you get for getting all achievements. So
okay.
So it's 8 more. I know that. I mean, I don't know what specifically all the ones are, but I know that there's like finding all the memory chips, listening to or watching some interviews that are in there, which are just in-game lore basically. There's getting a legendary rating on I think like 50 or 60 things. There's getting all of my porter, that is delivery man, stats up to I think 60 is what it's supposed to be, and I'm not sure about the rest of them, but it's random stuff, mostly grindy, but it's actually been going faster than I was expecting to do some of these things, so that's been nice.
Okay then, so I guess that one should be reasonable to do before Rebirth then.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think with the legendary one, like I think I'm supposed to have like 50 legendary ratings, and I'm at like 15 maybe, if that, maybe like 13 to 15 right now. So I mean, some of them don't take super long, so there's that. But yeah. So getting into the news, we have had some significant leaks when it comes to the Switch 2. Like, it has been ridiculous, the kind of stuff that's been coming up here. And I mean, we'll get into like various things that have come up in general, but the biggest of those, if you're watching the video version, this is, I guess you could say it's a potential spoiler because there's one of the manufacturers who does accessories for the Switch. I believe it's Genki is the manufacturer. Yeah, Genki. They put out at CES. They have a trailer that essentially shows off what the Switch 2 looks like, albeit with like their special skin attached to it that gives like additional grip or whatever to the Switch 2 itself and various things. But we're gonna play that little trailer here in the background, and yeah, it's like basically confirming all the things that we already had seen about the Switch, as well as some additional features. The magnetic Joy-Cons being one of those things that attach and detach with that special button that was on the back of those shells that we had seen previously. It appears that there is some type of laser optical sensor on the inside of the right Joy-Con, and that there's like the color scheme that they're using, at least partially on the Joy-Con, is blue and orange, kind of like the Portal colors. And yeah, just various other things. But what are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I have no reason to believe that this isn't false. Also, I don't know if you wanted to mention this here, but about the what Genki said about the release date for this.
Oh yeah, potentially April of this year, which would make perfect sense. But yeah.
Yeah, because they said they were going to release it right alongside the Switch too, which, yeah, I mean, considering the fact that Nintendo hasn't said anything, assuming all this stuff is true, man, Mario's doing a horrible job. He's a plumber and can't fix all these leaks. That's just, he's not doing his job right. But it's interesting though. I really wanted to see how the magnetic Joy-Cons worked, because my mind really couldn't grasp it, especially the fact that I know you shouldn't technically just be able to easily pull it off, the Joy-Con off from the Switch console, but I was just thinking, if it's magnetic, how's that work? Like, something's got to keep it fixed there, so it doesn't, become detached. So looking at the video, it makes sense. It does, technically remind me of the original Switch, where you have the button on the back, you press, and then you can slide your Joy-Cons off the rails. I guess this will be easier. One thing though, I mean, granted, this is possibly just because of the case itself. I don't know how easier it is to detach the Joy-Cons with the way it is, because at least with the original Switch, it's a small button in the back. The way this one looks, it looks like, or at least because of the case shell around the Joy-Con, it looks like it's much larger, meaning it's possibly easier to press, which could be a problem if you accidentally press it and you detach your Joy-Con while you're holding it, which would be potentially bad because you might drop it. So I am partially concerned about that, but again, that would be something we'd have to see more so up close, especially without the case on the Joy-Con, so we actually know what it's like, because it could possibly be roughly the same size as the original one. As far as the optical sensor, that's definitely interesting. Nintendo definitely would have some sort of gimmick for it, similar with HD Rumble. Of course, how they would actually implement it remains to be seen. I mean, there could be something they're using. I mean, well, then no, I'll say they could technically, maybe even try doing something as far as like something that's more accurate, if not, even though it might not be the same. I'd say if they try to do something similar to like with the Wii remote with its with its sensor, but it might not be exactly as accurate, but maybe the way it's implemented could be something in a similar vein, because of the fact that it's not relying on pure gyro, but actually, sensing objects and whatnot. It could provide more accuracy in that department, but I would definitely say this is definitely a much larger, or at least from what it seems, a much larger. I mean, of course, we've also heard that from the original rumors and leaks, but just seeing it though, it definitely looks like a much larger device than the original Switch, which is interesting. Which, I mean, I do feel like they would probably introduce a Switch 2 Mini down the road for someone who wants something a little bit more portable. Though I also technically be curious to seeing how that would work as far as with some of the implementations. I mean, granted, Nintendo, they did stuff. Well, I think the Mini has HD Rumble, but if they do have a little Mini, I wonder how that would work, since with the standard Switch 2 having that little optical sensor, how they would implement any features in the Mini, since you can't detach Joy-Cons from the Mini Switch version. But yeah, overall interesting. I think I kind of like the curved shape of the dock more so than the square ones from the original dock.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just a little aesthetically better looking to me, but definitely will be interested in seeing more stuff. Now, assuming, of course, if it comes out in April, which personally, it's not too far off from March, which was when we were like sort of hoping it would be, because it would be nice to have it launch on the anniversary of the original Switch, but April's not too far off. That being said, though, it is January, this is normally the month where they would have a sort of direct, correct? Or would that be next month in February?
It seems to vary. I mean, when they did this, when they first did the like real actual direct for the Switch itself, that was in January.
Okay.
Well, that is, I mean, the reveal was October of 2016, and then the big on-stage presentation that they did in Japan was January of 2017.
Okay. Then, yeah, so I definitely feel like if it is coming out in April, we definitely will be hearing something this month. I would say maybe around the middle of the month. And considering the fact that they're usually on Wednesdays or something like that, I would say the 15th or the 22nd. That's going to be my guess. They might, just shadow drop something saying, or at least an announcement saying, hey, we have a Nintendo Switch Direct. Probably say next Monday, they'll say like, hey, on the 15th, or maybe like on the 20th. On the 22nd, we have Nintendo Switch Direct. Check it out. But I definitely believe that we'll hear something this month. But yeah, that's all I gotta say.
One thing I forgot to mention, one of the rumors with this is that this is actually going to have Hall effect joysticks, which if Nintendo does that, that is a wonderful thing. But I mean, I would imagine that after the disaster that has happened with the Switch Joy-Cons, I mean, I would hope that Nintendo would realize, yeah, we have to do the Hall effect, because even if it costs them a little bit more money, they've spent so much money fixing Joy-Cons that they needed to have something that was going to be basically foolproof, or something that wasn't going to break down. One thing I do want to mention, because I made a mistake earlier, I said that the optical sensor was in the right Joy-Con, and it's actually the left Joy-Con. So one of the things that's interesting that I saw is, as a theory, is that basically some people have speculated they could end up having a mouse mode for the Joy-Con. So the optical sensor would essentially be like the sensor in a mouse. And so you'd like theoretically put it on its side and use it like a mouse. And the idea of that intrigues me, but from a practical standpoint, I don't know how that would work because a mouse has a lot more to grip. And like I grabbed one of my Joy-Cons and I held it on its side like as much like a mouse as I could, and it's like my hands are way too big for this. This just is ridiculous. Now, if it had some type of shell that you could attach to it to make it function like a mouse, like I could see how the buttons themselves, like the shoulder buttons, could work as mouse buttons. But it's the rest of it that I don't know how that would work unless Nintendo specifically made that an option. And I do think that that would be really cool if they did something like that because, you know, you got shooters, for example. You know, there's definitely examples of games where a mouse controls are better always than joysticks for aiming. But I just don't see practically exactly how that would work unless they have some type of special shell that would attach to it to make it possible to do that. So we'll have to wait and see what actually happens. But one thing that's also interesting about this is that I've noticed in watching this trailer more, I think actually most of the trailer is actually just showing like legit footage of the Switch 2 without a shell, without any sort of, actually, no, never mind. I was thinking, oh, this could actually be the real, like this is what the actual shell looks like of the Switch 2 on its own. But then I realized, no, there's definitely some spots where it doesn't have where it has the gaps and stuff to where it's pretty obvious that it's just a special shell that Genki made for the Switch. So I don't know exactly how all that's going to work, but either way, I think this is definitely legitimate and that this is what the Switch 2 is going to look like. And, you know, from what we can tell, it appears to be an improvement on the original version, but at the same time also keeps enough of the form factor, like the positives of the original Switch's form factor, to where it could work really well. So I'm optimistic about it from that standpoint. Obviously, there's still a whole lot of questions, and we have to wait for Nintendo's official reveal, an explanation of what the Switch 2 does differently. But yeah, the one thing that okay, so there's also like this special C button, which is something new underneath the home button, and we have no idea what it's supposed to do. Some people have theorized that it could be basically making it so that it that the C button is a cast button, like that essentially you'd be able to do dual screen type functionality, similar to the Wii U, except in reverse. Which, I mean, theoretically, you think about it, phones can cast to TVs. I mean, granted, most of the time it's just basically bringing up, you know, like a YouTube video on the app, just that sort of thing, and you're not actually playing it from your phone. You're just having it display. I mean, like choosing from your phone, and then it plays it on the TV. But I don't know. That's one theory that people have had, and I think that that's an interesting concept. Because I do think that the Wii U in some ways was ahead of its time, but at the same time was also, you know, well, I mean, really, it was ahead of its time what it was trying to do. It's just that the technology wasn't there. You know, they couldn't make it as an actual Switch, and if they could do some of that same functionality, that could be pretty cool. One thing that I was just thinking of that could be pretty neat is with Xenoblade Chronicles X, since that's coming later. I mean, I think it's in April, which actually it would be after the launch of the Switch 2 if it's coming in April, is being able to do all that dual screen functionality that the original game had, except that you would be sending the signal of the game itself to the TV and then just, you know, still using the the Switch as the gamepad screen. So that could be interesting. But you know what else just occurred to me? This could be why they have held off on doing Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD. So that they could do all the map functionality, all the gamepad functionality that way. So that's another idea, another thought I had. One thing I will have to say is that I think I have thought of a solution that enables me to get a Switch 2 at launch, but not feel like I'm wasting my money because it wouldn't be an OLED screen. That solution is that I would get it as a family system. It would basically just be on the TV. And that way, because it's like, you know, my kids are all playing games now. It would be an opportunity for us to play some games together. But, you know, at the same time would give me the ability to test stuff out for videos and that sort of thing. And then, you know, down the line, whenever they do an OLED model, that would be specifically my Switch 2. So at least that's what I'm contemplating. I mean, like, I haven't made any firm decisions, in large part because, like, I don't know what the price is going to be, and I don't know, you know, if there's any good family games that be coming at launch, because, yes, while it does have backwards compatibility, you know, already confirmed by Nintendo, whether or not it would be worth spending the money to play backwards compatible games unless they were, you know, dramatically improved. I mean, there's only a handful of, like, multiplayer games that we would even play, and it's basically like Mario Kart, Mario Party, and that's about it, because my kids haven't yet gotten into Smash Brothers. And even if they did, it's like, well, Smash Brothers already runs at 60 frames per second on the Switch. So, I mean, what leap would they take beyond that? The only thing that I could see, like, being an improvement for Mario Kart would be that it would actually be able to do 60 frames per second in multiplayer, whereas when you're doing multiple people on the same Switch, it drops down to 30. So, but I can't remember if there were any other, like, rumors or, you know, stuff attached to it based on what we've seen in the videos. I know that from what I was seeing with the magnets, you know, with the release buttons, I think actually it would be basically, unless your fingers are curving all the way around the triggers, you are not likely to accidentally press those. And I know, like, holding my Switch, for example, at least the way I hold it, I never curve my fingers enough around, and you know, my hands are pretty large, but like, let me actually grab it right now. So when I'm holding my Switch, you know, even without the grip on, I mean, with the grip on, it's even more so. My hands are more spread out, but, you know, like, I'm not in any way in danger of reaching over and touching the little buttons on here. Like, I have to be intentional in doing that, and with the bigger buttons, because my fingers are on the triggers, you know, it would be hard to do that. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem. It looked like there was, like, rods that go in to the Switch, and some have also theorized that there's, like, magnets that rotate, but I think it's mostly the rods. Like, the rods go in, and when you press the button to release, then it pulls the rod out enough to where it detaches the magnet, essentially. But I'm sure that they've been researching this heavily so that they're much less likely to have problems with it. Either way, I'm very intrigued by the system, and I just hope that there's some significant, like, incentives to make it worthwhile, because really right now, apart from the idea of being able to test some stuff out, for me, I don't know what the incentive would be for me to grab a Switch 2. I mean, yeah, I would grab it as a family system and then get the OLED down the line, but I guess a lot of it's just going to depend also on what we find in terms of, what the launch lineup is, what kind of games are coming out with it. Like, actually, if Mario Kart 10 dropped with it at launch, I mean, that would be obvious. Like, be like, yes, I absolutely have to get that at launch. And then that would be something I could play with my kids, because right now they're all playing Mario Kart 7 on their 2DSs. And so it's like, hey, we could play Mario Kart 10 or 11 or whatever they call it together. Mario Kart 9, I don't know. I guess it would probably be either 9 or 10, depending on whether they count Mario Kart Tour as Mario Kart 9. But anyway, I'm intrigued. I'm very interested. I'm just anxious for Nintendo to show it, and then we can talk more about it. I mean, obviously, this video pretty much seems to confirm more or less what the Switch 2 looks like, but I still would like to see like the official thing from Nintendo, have something significant to talk about besides just what we see in the pictures, and just make this whole thing more interesting. So yeah, that's what I got.
Now this, something I just remembered, this wasn't necessarily related to this, and it was just something that people have been throwing around, was the discussion of the Switch 2 potentially having some sort of DLSS and using AI to upscale the games. Do you think that's something that Nintendo would actually be considering doing, since, graphics haven't been their primary objective, or do you think this is something that they would technically be using to, say, improve the performance of original Switch games to get them to the like higher resolutions, but also still have potentially boosting the performance of the original games as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very likely DLSS is going to be involved. I'm hoping that it's not frame generation, because I really hate frame generation, but or at least if they are using frame generation, that it's optional, because I don't want frame generation. But I know at the I believe at the very least that DLSS will be used as part of the upscaling for 4K TVs, because this game is going to be 4K capable, just not obviously native 4K. It's going to be just like, with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series consoles, where it doesn't actually render the majority of the games at 4K. This one won't render at 4K, period, but it will still, I believe, be able to upscale to 4K, because upscaling doesn't really take any real extra horsepower to do. I mean, you could do it on a lot of PCs. It's just a matter of doing a setting in the graphics card in order for it to upscale to 4K without actually having to render anywhere near that. But yeah, I think it's going to be impressive what it does in terms of how it looks and everything on 4K displays. It's just obviously you're going to have fanboys who think it's actually rendering at 4K, and they'll be completely wrong because people don't understand how technology works.
All right. Well, that's all that I have. But just that was just like one last thing I just remembered I wanted to ask about.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is all just my opinion, speculation, educated guess, that sort of thing. But I'm anxious to see what they're gonna actually do with this, because it's like we're getting all these leaks and all these questions, and like half of me is wondering, is Nintendo doing this on purpose? Like they're actually leaking these things ahead of time, because it doesn't seem like they've made any effort to pull these things down. But
it's true.
At the same time, you look at like the Genki video, that looks real, like that, and with everything else we've seen, between the shells, and I mean, it's just like confirming all these things we've already seen, and Nintendo doesn't seem to be trying to pull anything down. So maybe this is just their marketing strategy. They're just putting stuff out early, because unlike with the Switch 1, I mean, with the Switch 1, it was like we had no real idea of what it was going to be, apart from like a few things here and there that had leaked out, but it was like more like patents and that sort of thing, and what people were reporting in terms of what the Switch was going to do, being the hybrid and all of that. But now it's like we have essentially pictures of the actual hardware, or at least a render that represents the hardware in a way that's probably accurate. You have accessory manufacturers saying this is that the Switch is coming at this time frame in spring 2025. That you have, and they have essentially what appears to be stuff that is supposed to be available for the Switch 2. It's like, I could see this being a potential quote unquote 4D chess move for Nintendo, because other companies do stuff like this too, where they're just putting this stuff out ahead of time. They're leaking it so that they can get people more hyped up in preparation. And then when they actually reveal it, it's not like when you leak a game ahead of time or whatever and spoil surprise or what have you. It's more like, this is not necessarily surprising because it's another Switch, but it is different. There's some differences that it's like everybody's wondering, okay, what is this? What does this do? What does the C button do? What does the optic sensor? What does it do? What do these things do? What are the joysticks? Hall effect joysticks? Is there a mouse mode? I mean, what is all this? What is it? And we all want to know. And even though you and I are more or less reformed Nintendo fanboys, or recovering Nintendo fanboys, however you want to see it, because we're much more PC gamers, it's still, what Nintendo does is far more exciting to me than what Sony and Microsoft do in general. Though, obviously, if either one of them puts out a new handheld, particularly Microsoft, seeing what they do with that would be pretty exciting. It's just at the same time, it's less exciting because it's still just kind of the same thing over and over. And Nintendo, even though, yes, the Switch 2 basically seems to be like just a better version of the Switch, it's also something where that Nintendo's going to have some gimmick that has a potential to be really interesting. Especially with that optical sensor. It's like, what is that? How is that going to work? Is it going to be a mouse mode? Is it something entirely different? Obviously, it works in some way. With there was like that video, that you could see the laser coming through that hole, and that's what you have in a mouse. So, I mean, what is it? But anyway, I think we've talked enough about the Switch 2 for now, and maybe by this time next week we will have the actual reveal of the Switch 2, and we'll be able to talk in depth about what Nintendo has actually said or what they show in their official trailer. And maybe it'll still be a while, who knows. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and move on to our next topic here. So, don your tinfoil hats, and you can go ahead and talk a bit about all this Half-Life 3 stuff.
All right. So, once again, after you put on your tinfoil hats, we have yet another rumor of Half-Life 3 being in development. So here's an article from Insider Gaming talking about Half-Life 3 has moved to its next stage of playtesting. And this is according to Gabe Follower, who has a channel, and he's had sources before that have revealed HLX Half-Life 3, and said that development has started for playtests for family and friends of Valve developers in the past few months. And as the article says, while the information doesn't give us much information into what Half-Life 3 entails, it does tell us that the project is now at a fundamental stage of development and could see the game further delayed if it does not resonate with well with the new playtests. Also, one thing I also should mention is that Gabe Follower has had a history of leaking other information about Valve titles, most notably Deadlock from last year. And then, other stuff about playtests that have had delays would be Half-Life Alyx, which had a 1-year rewrite for the story. Deadlock also had several delays due to feedback during the sessions, and the article says the playtests do not tell us that Half-Life 3 could be near its announcement soon, though presumably sometime during 2025. If not, well, it's entirely possible that the game could leak online due to the game now being accessed by more people. As for when Half-Life 3 will be released, it remains to be seen, but Gabe Follower's claims suggest that the game is progressing well. So yeah, that's definitely interesting. But what are your thoughts on this rumor?
Well, I have my tinfoil hat firmly attached to my head, and I believe this is real. I want to believe it's real, and so therefore I believe it's real. I believe Half-Life 3 is in fact coming, that it's being worked on, that it's in playtesting right now. As for whether or not it would come out this year, that part I'm not sure about. I have a feeling that once it's revealed, it will not be long after that it's actually released. Unless Valve decides that they're not doing physical copies, which they may or may not. If they don't do physical copies, they could shadow drop it. They could reveal it and drop it the same day. They could. They absolutely could. And the hype alone, it would crash everyone's servers, and it's like, it's going to sell. Even people who've never played Half-Life, because of the legendary status of this franchise, it's going to sell. And obviously the big question is whether or not it's in the state that it needs to be to where they can actually sell it. Because, if them having delayed Half-Life Alyx and Deadlock because of feedback, or in the case of Half-Life Alyx rewriting the story, that's the one thing that I think is the part that makes me unsure about how soon we'll see it. But obviously I'm hoping it's very soon, because we've been waiting forever for this game, and yeah, it's not like we can't wait longer. We've waited long enough as it is. It's like, okay, it's been, close to 20 years. And we're coming up on 20 years, and 2027 was when the last or 2017 or 2007. My goodness, I can't talk correctly. 2007 was when Half-Life 2 Episode 2 came out. So, it's been a long time. I played Half-Life 2 in, I want to say it was probably 2010. 2010 or 2011 is when I played it. So, I played through the base game and then the 2 episodes following that. So it's like, okay, even if it never comes out, or I die before it comes out, or whatever, it's like, okay, whatever. But at the same time, if this actually comes, it's going to be huge. Now, whether or not it's going to be good, that's a question that is hard to answer. But based on what everyone has said about Half-Life Alyx, I have faith that it will be a really great game. And, all they have to do is take what was great about the original game, make improvements based on where games are today compared to where they were in 2007, and they'll be good. Obviously, most people would actually, at least fans of the Half-Life series, would be perfectly fine if it was just a source engine, exactly the same game, exactly the same in terms of gameplay. But, they do have Source 2, and I'm pretty sure that's what Half-Life Alyx was in. And so, there's not really any reason why they wouldn't upgrade the game, especially because of how long it's been. It's been a really long time. So, either way, Like I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll see it this year. I believe it exists regardless. I think that there is enough smoke in addition to, you know, the other teases that they did previously, like I can't even remember what specifically they were, but you know, it was like stuff having to do with the Borealis and all that other stuff that we were talking about last year. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
I guess just as a quick question and partially for clarification, why would you say there would be a physical drop for this game, considering the fact that PC hasn't had a...
Well, I was saying that I don't think there will be a physical drop, but that would be the only way that it wouldn't be a shadow drop, is if they were doing a physical version. And even then, actually, realistically speaking, they could just do the physical version separately at a different time and still do shadow drop for the digital. Get many people to double dip.
That's definitely true. There are definitely people who would do that. Yeah, I agree. I think this is definitely likely and in the works. As far as when this could come out, that's something I'm not certain. I personally think that it might possibly come next year. I feel like unless the game is very well ahead of things, I just don't see anything that's which suggests. I mean, granted, nothing has even been shown yet, but I know I just feel like it's too soon. I mean, of course, like you said, Valve could just like shadow drop the game and say, "Hey, here's Half-Life 3. Are you happy now? Don't ask us for anything ever again." But I don't know. I don't know. I just don't feel like it's going to come out now unless Valve actually says something. So I feel like it's going to be next year. But I would like to be wrong on that end. If it comes out this year, great. I'll definitely get it. But that'll be interesting. Now, one thing that I am very curious about, considering the fact that the other games have been ported over, with the exception of Alex, which I don't know if that's something that Valve still is possibly considering porting over, would be if they brought Half-Life 3 also to consoles as well.
Yeah,
that's something
it will be on consoles for sure.
Do you think it's something that would be day and date, or something that would be like coming out later on?
I think it'll be day and date, or you know, at like there might be a slight delay, but honestly, I think it's just going to be day and date.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I feel like I do feel like if it were just on PC, they would shadow drop it, but I feel like if they were also going to put it on consoles, they might want to announce it ahead of time.
Yeah, maybe
give enough, since console gamers may or may not be as hyped as PC gamers, so they might want to, you know, say, hey, we've got this game coming for, unless they did something where there was a slight delay, like we're shadow dropping this now on PC, and, you know, say next month or so it comes to consoles. I feel like I just feel like, for at least for the console side, they would want to give a bit of a head notice on that end. I mean, I feel like they could shadow drop it on PC, but we'll just see. It definitely will be interesting to see, like, if we hear something, you know, when that would be, since, I mean, Valve has been, you know, pretty tight-lipped when it comes to new reveals. I mean, considering the fact that, you know, 3 years ago at a high school, or I think it was a high school presentation, a kid asked Gabe about, you know, potentially bringing games to consoles, and then he just said, expect to hear more from us later on, and he was very vague about that. And then later that year we got the Steam Deck. And so I mean, if Valve's gonna be, very tight-lipped about things, that's probably when they would just say, "Boom, here we go. Here's what we've got." So we'll definitely see.
Yeah, for sure. Now the real question is, will it be Steam Deck verified? I think it will be. I think that Valve, because it's their product and because they actually know how to optimize games, actually care enough to optimize games, that they would make it Steam Deck verified.
I definitely agree with that. And if it wasn't for the fact that it's VR, I would definitely say that Alex would have been Steam Deck verified.
Yeah. I think it is playable on the Steam Deck. It's just because there are like I can't remember if it's just a mod or if it's like a fan patch, but it's essentially a mod that makes it possible to play without VR.
Huh.
I just have never looked into it or rather, I haven't ever tried it because I'm just a little hesitant to drop the money on something that I'm just not quite sure how well it would be that way. I mean, like, that is probably the one and only game I would want to play in VR, because I know that it is extremely well made, and of course I love Half-Life. But yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I'll have to look into that, but yeah, I definitely do agree though that this is a game that I am confident that it would be verified and we could get that running. I mean, I was gonna say, I was like, if Valve wanted to also shadow drop it and say, hey, we're releasing this also next to the Steam Deck too, that would be great. But I know Valve said that they wanted to wait until they felt there was sufficient cause for upgrading or for releasing a new Steam Deck, so that'll definitely be off into the future.
Just watch. Half-Life 3 is going to be revealed alongside the Switch 2. It's going to be in their highlight reel trailer, have Half-Life 3 in there. I mean, Switch 2 is going to get some big games right away for sure. Or at least maybe not right away, but like that will be announced in their initial thing. Like, we know, I say it's pretty definitive, you're going to get Metaphor ReFantazio, you're going to get Persona 3 Reload, probably going to get Elden Ring, potentially other Dark Souls games. I think that would be great. I would double dip buy physical versions of Dark Souls 2 and 3 for sure. And Elden Ring on a cartridge. That's a beautiful thing. Man. But yeah, like I'm leaning more and more towards getting a Switch 2 at launch. But like I said, the main thing would be, number one, it would be for playing games with the kids, because I want it to be something that they can actually play, because the only time that they play the Switch is when we're playing this stuff as a family. And, this would give them an opportunity to maybe try out some single-player stuff as well. I mean, they'd have to take turns, of course, which would make things challenging, but it's like, I'm not buying multiple of them. I'm buying one. You kids can learn to share. And then when it comes to whenever the OLED version comes out, then I'm buying that for me. And for me alone. So, or at least primarily for me. But yeah. We'll see what happens. A lot of it's going to depend on price and all that. And anyway, getting back onto the Half-Life 3 thing here. I mean, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't bring it to the Switch 2. And I think it's going to be an absurdly well optimized game across the board, because Valve actually, being a PC company, PC first, they know how to optimize games for PC. I mean, imagine that. Imagine optimizing your games. Use the Steam Deck as a baseline. Like, this is where we start. We're going to optimize it for this, and then everything that's more powerful than it is going to run the game even better. Imagine that. If more developers did that, we would have better games that ran better. We wouldn't be relying on frame generation and fake upscaling garbage. We would just have games that run properly. I mean, imagine that. But yeah. I digress. All right. Any other thoughts on that?
No, sir.
All right. So with it getting kind of late and it's already being at the 2-hour mark, I think we're going to call it early tonight. Mostly because the other stories are not as interesting. I mean, we can mention that the NVIDIA 50 series cards were officially revealed. But I think I want to talk more about them once we actually get to a point of being able to see the real world performance, because I think that they're blowing smoke right now on how powerful these cards are, especially considering multiple frame generation is one of the things that's a major factor. So, we are going to wait to talk more about that until we actually hear something specific, you know, as far as people doing real world testing, and we'll go from there.
That sounds good.
All right, recommendations and dissuasions.
All right, so my recommendation, I thought I did this last week, but then I checked back and saw I didn't do it, so I'm going to do it this week. My recommendation is Godzilla -1. It's a very solid Godzilla film, and I would say if you never had to watch a single Godzilla film, and I know some Godzilla fans might have take some offense to this, I would say this would be the one film to watch, because it's something that sort of takes the essence of the original Godzilla film while also adding a very some very good layers of characterization for all the characters in the midst of trying to also combat a giant monster trying to destroy them. So it's definitely great. There's definitely a tease for a sequel, but I think even if nothing ever comes out of that, I think by itself, it just does a great job. So I recommend it.
Very good. Well, I think just on the fly here, as a side recommendation to something that's a love letter to Godzilla and things like that, I'm going to recommend the Cloverfield movies. Now, the first one is a little harder to watch because it's shaky camera for the whole thing, but it's really good, and I really liked it. And the other ones are good too, and they're connected in a different way, but they're really interesting. I think we need to rewatch those sometime soon. But yeah, they're really solid movies. I really like them. So, in fact, I think the original Cloverfield is the one I've seen more than once, and the other two we have them, but we haven't watched them since we got them, because there's a 10 Cloverfield Lane in the Cloverfield Paradox. But yeah, it's all really interesting stuff. I mean, I know not everybody likes J.J. Abrams, and I'm not sure actually if Abrams was involved in all three of them or if he was just involved in the first one, but either way, I dig them. They're great. So, but my recommendations, one thing is, so anyone who's ever watched any of the UK version of Top Gear, the classic one that had Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond, of course there's the Grand Tour, which is after they got fired from Top Gear, Amazon started doing a bunch of stuff with them, and Grand Tour was the initial thing they did. And Grand Tour just did their final special. It's the last time that the three of those guys are going to be doing a car show together. So it was good, of course, as all of their stuff has been great. And of course, they have all their own side programs. Like James May has a cooking show called Oh Cook, as a play on his typical phrase "Oh cock." And he's also done like Our Man in Japan, Our Man in Italy, Our Man in India. I can't remember what else, but basically it's just him going to those countries and learning about the cultures and trying out different foods and all sorts of stuff. Very, good stuff, you know, typical stuff. And Richard Hammond, I think the only thing he's really done specifically for Amazon was he did, I can't remember the name of it, but it was like where he and Tori Belleci from Mythbusters got shipwrecked on an island, and they had to survive essentially using basically what they had from the wreckage and what was around them on the island. It was super fun and funny, and I mean, it was kind of like a pseudo reality kind of thing. Like it wasn't intended to be like, oh well, they have no access to anything, but it's more like, how would they survive on a desert island, you know, with this kind of stuff and their knowledge. And so it was really interesting and fun. But I don't think Hammond's done anything else. And then, of course, Clarkson has Clarkson's Farm, where he has actually, I mean, let's see, they've done 3 seasons with that. I think it's just 3 seasons. And I mean, because he's owned farmland for many years, but he actually, it got to a point where he started being actively involved and learning how to manage it himself. I think it was that he had, like, whoever he had been paying had passed away. Whoever he had been paying to manage the farm had passed away, and so then he took over and was learning how to do it. And so he's since then learned a lot about farming, really grown to love it. And I mean, he's not making any money from the farm itself, or at least not, you know, enough given the costs of all that, but he's also extremely wealthy, so he can afford to take the hit. But it's still, he's brought a lot of attention to what British farmers have to deal with the government regulations and everything else, and just the challenges in general of farming across the board, but especially in Britain. So, but of course, it's highly entertaining and really interesting. So yeah, it's all good stuff. But yeah, Grand Tour had their final special. And I mean, they haven't done like a regular show like Top Gear since I think the first season of the Grand Tour, where they were still doing that. And then since then, it's been, I think after like season 2, they just did specials, and that's all they've done. So this is the end of that for them, but it was pretty cool. And then finally, I just want to say, if you are willing to, well, maybe that's not the right way of putting it. I would say if you game on PC, particularly on Windows, get GOG copies of games whenever you can. I mean, sometimes it's a little harder, but you can occasionally get free copies through like Amazon Prime, which, I mean, I guess it's technically not free, but it's included with Prime, that they give them out. And then once you have them, they're yours. It's not like you have to remain subscribed in order to get them. Once you claim them, they're yours. So, but the offline installer versions, you don't have to deal with any DRM, and that makes it easier to install the games and play them without anything slowing down your performance. So that's what I got. My recommendations.
Yeah, very good. And also, just as a small side note to that, occasionally GOG also has games they put out for free as well.
That's true.
So you can always check out. It won't always be, you know, the same type of game that you would get from Amazon Prime, but they still have something that they put out there. So
yeah, and there are hidden gems in there too. You know, sometimes you'll get something that's like a really old PC game that you would never play otherwise, but it's like, hey, it's free. I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there was something else I was going to say about that. This is kind of going back to something that I sort of played, and I'm just going to briefly talk about it because I more was setting it up for my wife because she's a huge fan of the series. But there's a Wheel of Time game that was made back in the late 90s for PC, and it is basically a first-person shooter, more or less, but not with guns. I mean, with magic and stuff, and using the original Unreal Engine, and it's doesn't have button controls at all, so I had to do quite a bit to fiddle around with it to get it functional on the Steam Deck, possible to control. But I did manage to get it working. It doesn't run anywhere near as well as it should, though. I mean, it should be 90 frames per second without any problems, but I couldn't quite get it to even... I was even having issues getting it to maintain 60. I think I might have figured out I think it was that when I started using a different renderer, then I was getting 60 consistently. But anyway, so I had set that up on the Steam Deck so my wife could play that because she loves the Wheel of Time. And even though it's not using the story from the books at all, it's its own story. I still figured it would be something fun for her. And it was kind of fun to figure out how to make a game that is exclusively a mouse and keyboard game and set it up on the Steam Deck. Plus, it was $1.50 when I bought it. It was exceedingly cheap. So it's like, hey, I never would have checked it out otherwise, but it's like $1.50. Yeah, I'll buy that. Shoot, that's dirt cheap. Yeah. Anyway. Dissuasions.
All right, so I've been actually struggling to have a good one, but something that pops to my mind is if you have any sort of struggle in this area, do not rely on one alarm if you have to wake up any earlier than you normally do. I happen to have to get up earlier this week, and I set one alarm thinking that I would be fine, having to take care of something before I had to get ready for work. I woke up initially with that alarm. I turned the alarm off and just rolled back over. And next thing I know, I woke up around the time I'm supposed to normally be getting up. And so I realized, well, there goes the work I was supposed to get done. So yeah, I should have set another one. So don't rely on just one alarm if you have to wake up at a time that is much earlier than you normally get up. Set a backup one just in case.
Especially if you're
at least if you struggle in that area. If you're someone who always wakes up with an alarm, then you're good to go. But if not, don't just rely on one.
Yeah, thankfully I can't remember the last time I struggled to wake up to an alarm. Usually, alarm goes off, I'm awake. I'm not necessarily wanting to get up, but usually I'll do something to make sure that I'm actually waking up, even if I'm super tired. I'll just I'll put my knee up or something because I can't fall asleep that way. I'll lay on my back, and usually most of the time I'll just end up sitting up in my bed if I need a second before I get out of bed. But I never set a snooze, never set multiple alarms, because I know that if I did, I would probably sleep. I'd probably oversleep too much, but yeah, it's long enough that I'm disciplined in that area. One of the only areas where I'm disciplined, so hey, it's something. All right. As for my dissuasion is trying to run Dragon Age Origins GOG or EA versions on deck. I'm hoping that the suggestions you've given me will solve that problem, not because I'm planning to play the game anytime soon, but more because when I do play it, I would love to play it on the Steam Deck because it will make it much, much easier to play. So, but yeah, that's what I got. All right, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. Finally put out my video reviewing my year in Linux gaming. So going over my stats, comparing those with the previous year, and just seeing how things went with that, and also discussing some of the issues that also came up when trying to run games in Linux. So yeah, definitely check that out. I'm not certain what the next video will be. I think it'll depending on what happens with news and stuff, but the next thing I probably will be doing might be another sort of puzzle challenge. This one's going to be a Zelda based puzzle, so see if I can solve that. That'll depend on when it gets it here.
For sure. Good stuff. All right, well, you can find me on my gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. Nothing new has been put up this week, mostly because I just decided not to break up last week's episode since it really was just the one topic. talking about our games of the year, which was the focus of the entire episode. So there's nothing from that standpoint. And I am working on my next OLED comparison for Persona 5 Strikers between the Switch OLED and the Steam Deck OLED. That is, I haven't made a whole lot of progress in it, but I think it's going to come together really nicely when I get to it. Thankfully, it shouldn't take as long as like most of the longer comparisons have, because of the fact that it's just an hour of gameplay instead of 2 hours. And of course, it's only 2 systems instead of 3. Though I do probably have another 3-system one coming up for Freedom Wars. I'm just not sure how soon that'll happen, because the Switch version of Freedom Wars is coming. I think it comes out like the 30th, maybe. I can't remember what date. It's something like that. It's sometime late in the month that it comes out. So, but it's coming through Play Asia, because they only have imports for the physical version. So, or actually, it might even be that they just don't have a US version outside of Play Asia, which is dumb. But either way, I went for it because I wanted a physical version. So yeah, there's a chance that that'll end up being one of the ones I work on in the not too distant future. And yeah, but otherwise, I also have my YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. That's YouTube at NABD Cooking. And the Chubby Ninja Burger, I did switch over to public, so if you haven't already watched that, feel free to check it out. I certainly made some mistakes in how I put it together, as far as the cooking process, mostly because that was only my second time ever cooking smash burgers, and then I stupidly forgot to grease my griddle before cooking my eggs, so they kind of stuck a bit, but they were fried eggs anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. But it was so good, so delicious, and well worth checking out, well worth making. You don't have to have a griddle to make it. You can easily do it on the stove. It's just I did it on the griddle because I had the griddle, and then I could do more at a time. So anyway, I don't have any more recipes ready to go at all. I haven't really had a chance to get more stuff recorded, and more I'm still trying to figure out what I want to put out next. I don't have anything specific in mind, so we'll see what happens. It's probably going to be a much lighter year for content on that channel. Doing a lot of reevaluating of stuff in general. So, but then of course we have the podcast. Obviously, if you are listening to the audio-only version, that comes out every Friday at 12 a.m. Central Time on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Pandora Radio, Amazon Music, if I didn't already say that. Basically, any podcast platform, you're going to find it there, audio-only version. The video version, as a companion to that, comes out every Friday, normally 7 a.m. Central Time, barring any technical issues. And that not only has all the same content that's already in the audio-only version, but also you can see our beautiful faces and gameplay clips from all the stuff we've been talking about. Of course, the Switch 2 trailer thing also was in our episode this week, so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, then you'll be able to watch that as well. More likely than not, if you follow anything on YouTube related to the Switch 2, you've probably already seen something with it because it's been on a bunch of channels, but either way, it's interesting and it gives you a chance to really see see it a lot, since we spent quite a while talking about the Switch 2. But in addition to that, of course, if you have any desire to contact us, whether you have questions, comments, want to tell us to Persona 3 ourselves, or any number of things, you can not only comment on the video version, you can also send us an email, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send us a tweet / an X. I don't know what you call it on X. You can contact us at the Orange Box Pod. I'm not active on there at all. In fact, I haven't posted there in quite some time. I don't even think I've been tweeting out the episodes because I just don't care about Twitter / X. But if you reach out to us, I will get back to you. So, and if it's a question for the show itself, then we'll read it on the show and go from there. But even if you don't contact us, it's really not a problem because we're going to talk for 2.5 hours every week regardless, because this is how we catch up from week to week. And it's also a good outlet just to talk about video games and all the news and the craziness and stuff like that. So that is everything, I believe. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, don't use frame generation in your video games because it's garbage. Orange Box Podcast out.